everyone, I'm Nina Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This is where we discuss developments in our backyard, in our neighborhood that impacts India. Today's focus is India navigating the perilous waters ahead as we attempt, not always successfully, at keeping our friends close and our enemies closer. In this case, a friend, as in Vladimir Putin's Russia, and an enemy in President Xi Jinping's China, with whom there's been no direct bilateral engagement beyond the pull aside at Bali and at Johannesburg since the Galwan clash of 2020. Now, days after India announced Prime Minister Narendra Modi's was giving the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit on July 3rd and 4th a miss, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar is representing India at Astana instead. Moscow has announced Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first official bilateral state visit after he took office for the third term would be to Russia. President Vladimir Putin, international pariah who brought war to Europe's doorstep, has even said he was looking forward to meeting Prime Minister Modi at the Kazakh capital. But that isn't to be. Instead, an India-Russia summit is on the cards, and now in a signal that he remains intent on expanding China's influence over the global south, Xi Jinping has raised the punch-shield principles of 1954, the Nehru-Chow-en-lai meet in Bandung, to resolve the border impasse of that time. Xi is beginning an unprecedented third term as China's president, as is Modi as prime minister, and Vladimir Putin has just won a fifth term as president as well. All of this begs the question. One, are we seeing a new great game in the Himalayas? Is this Russian roulette or Chinese checkers? And three, is India being nudged by Russia to start a political dialogue with Beijing? And four, how does India navigate between its new ally, the United States, which it cannot afford to alienate, and old ally Russia, chief arms supplier and source of cheap oil? It's being said that India is worried that Pakistan, a China proxy, is becoming a member of the United Nations Supreme Security Council for 2 years, and India is out of the International Human Rights Council. India needs Russia more than ever. Today, discussing the path forward on whether India should go along with the Russian roulette are two stalwarts on the region. Ambassador Ashok Kant is a former Indian diplomat who served as Indian ambassador to China, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, and as India High Commissioner to Malaysia. He is currently the director of the Institute of Chinese Studies in Delhi and a distinguished fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Ambassador. Also on the show is Punchok Stopdan, who served as the Indian ambassador to Kyrgyzstan. He was also a senior fellow at Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis and founding president of the Ladakh International Center. An academic, diplomat, and author, he's earlier served in the National Security Council Secretariat and is author of The Great Game in the Buddhist Himalayas, India and China's Quest for Strategic Dominance. So let's start with you, Ambassador Khan. Why is India giving the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, meet in Astana on July 3rd, 4th, a miss? There are senior Indian diplomats who are advocating that while India is right to be shoring up its military deterrence on the line of actual control after Galwan, it may be time to open up dialogue, a political dialogue with Beijing. I mean, wouldn't Astana have given a chance for Modi to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, or would that be not such a good idea?
Well, Nina, in diplomacy, you have to exercise choice all the time. Parliament is in session. If Prime Minister wish to go to Russia, media reports indicate that a visit will take place shortly. It was difficult for him to travel twice, first to Astana, then again to Moscow, a little later. So he has decided not to go to Astana and will be represented at a very senior level. We'll have our Minister of External Affairs representing India at the SCO summit. And let's keep in mind the fact that these summits, while bilateral meetings are important, I don't think a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping would have been something that could have resulted in a breakthrough. These high-level meetings, summit-level meetings require a lot of preparation. So I'm not really worried that Prime Minister will not be meeting President Xi at Astana. Uh, I think what is more important, if Prime Minister is traveling to Russia, as media reports indicate, it's a very clear signal from India about our strategic engagement with Russia, that we attach a very high degree of importance to that relationship for a variety of reasons. Partly legacy factors are there. There are contemporary requirements, including in terms of uh, oil we are purchasing from Russia or continuing defense engagement. But most importantly, we believe that Russia remains for us an important strategic partner. And for a variety of reasons, Prime Minister had not been able to go to Russia for some time. And now he's traveling. In the past, there was this tradition of annual summit meetings between Prime
That's
Minister
right.
of India and President of Russia that was disrupted partly because of COVID, partly because of the Ukraine conflict. I believe that with that process will be resumed. We had a visit to Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, to Moscow in December last year, and he met with President Putin at that time. And one hears reports about a likely visit of President Putin to India,
That's
not
right.
too distant a future. So
Hmm.
essentially, what I would like to reiterate, that the visit of Prime Minister to Moscow is a very clear signal, both of importance we attach to our relations with Russia and of our strategic autonomy.
So if I can go back to Xi Jinping, was India, I mean, this sounds a little coarse in saying it and rude, but was India rubbing it in Xi Jinping's nose by allowing the US congressional team to visit Dharamshala to meet the Dalai Lama last week? I mean, Xi Jinping has only upped the ante with his chest thumping. I mean, days after the congressional delegation visited Dharamshala, and the Dalai Lama was referred to as a splittist. China's President Xi Jinping has now praised the Panchsheel agreement between Nehru and Zhou Enlai. When they agreed on a Bandung agreement, for resolving, their border dispute. He's now touting it as a framework for resolving contemporary geopolitical conflicts. And he's raised all this while during a visit by Mahinda Rajapaksa, the former Sri Lankan president, and there were various other leaders there. It almost looks as if he is pitching to be the leader of the global south. I mean, using an old formula, so to speak, for that. Do you see that at all, or am I misreading it completely?
I think these are two unrelated issues. One visit of US congressional delegation to Dharamshala and the subsequent meeting with Prime Minister Modi and other Indian leaders. You have to bear in mind the fact that we have never come in the way of foreign dignitaries meeting with His Holiness Dalai Lama. We have always regarded him as a very respected person, and he meets with people, he travels abroad, he interacts with Indian leaders. We have
But
never
Master,
been
this
timid about
visit
it.
was quite high profile. You had
Uh,
Nancy
well,
Pelosi
it
and
was,
you had Michael McCall,
yeah,
and
but
they're about to
uh,
pass the Tibet Resolve Act.
it was high profile because Nancy Pelosi is Speaker Emerita of U.S. House of Representatives. You had Chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, U.S. House of Representatives. So they made certain statements while in Dharamshala, which resonated with media. And earlier there was also this, Resolve Tibet bill, which has been adopted by US Congress and now is pending signature by President Joe Biden. So there was that background, but that was not our background. This
Yeah.
issue is playing out in a certain way in USA. But we are not trying to in any way sort of
Stoke it.
raise the profile of the issue or stoking it. It's as far
Yeah.
as India is concerned, is fairly normal practice.
Okay.
It's not a departure from past practices or precedents. This is about about US Codel. Coming to President Xi Jinping's statement about Panchsheel, China has been playing up Panchsheel from time to time, which we find rather strange because they have not quite lived up to principles and precepts reflected in
Of the
Panchsheel.
Panchil.
Yes, beginning with what happened in late
Galwan.
1950s and no, even earlier,
Oh, yes,
1962
yes.
conflict. So
Yeah.
there is a backdrop. Uh, he's trying to sort of project Panchsheel as a possible framework. I'm not sure it will gain much traction.
That's
China
interesting.
is keen to position itself as a leader of global South. Uh, Again, that space is not so open. Global South
Hmm.
has its own views. I don't think they are quite looking for a country A or country B to be the leader. So let's see how it develops. But I would not like to sort of link up the two issues. How
Yeah.
it
No,
dealt with
I get where you're
yes.
going. I understand that.
Yeah, but Panchsheel is talked about because it's the 75th anniversary of Panchsheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Chinese have been talking about Panchsheel off and on, but they keep
But does it have
claiming
any
that.
credence? Does it have
Hello?
any credence at all?
Well, it became defunct in the 50s itself, but in principle, it still have relevance because it's an Indian concept. Panchasheel, that's a Buddha, Ashoka's principles of coexistence, peaceful coexistence. We are the ones who initiated and we are the ones who abandoned it. The Xi Jinping keeps on reminding you this is your concept. So I don't see any something mischievous in what Xi Jinping says. It's for the countries to adhere to it or don't adhere to it. In principle, we like non-alignment. It's the same thing. We invented that, and today we don't talk about non-alignment. So same thing is with the Panchsheel 54 agreement. But I think in our context, it was more to do with the trade relationship, border trade relationship, and the pilgrimage relationship. These are the two major components. It was not a treaty. It was just an agreement to facilitate trade and pilgrimage. Now, once Tibet was occupied by the Chinese, Indians thought this has become irrelevant. And also it had a stipulated sort of time frame, so 5 years or 6 years or something. It was an experiment kind of a thing. It didn't work. It didn't work. Today, the Chinese keep on reminding us about this peaceful border. So this is a peaceful coexistence. They can say that, and I have seen they say the same thing with the Nepalese. They say with the everybody. They use this Panchil, the phrase. Sri
That's
Lanka
right.
was at the beginning was party to it.
But India not playing a game at all? I mean, it did exchange congratulatory, messages with Taiwan, and that really did upset China. I mean, the Chinese spokesperson strongly objected to that. Why are we really not shifting gears on China at all?
Uh, Nina, a point I would like to make that uh, there is no change in policy as such when it
We
comes
haven't changed
to
our one
Tibet
China policy.
or Taiwan. We don't reiterate one China policy. We haven't done that since 2009 for very good reasons because we are not happy with Chinese behavior on a whole lot of issues affecting our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we have made it clear to them that it can't be one-way traffic. If they don't respect one India position, very difficult for us to keep repeating one China policy. So that's a different matter. But we have not changed our policy. But in terms of signaling, these things do happen. Uh, you know, if you look at the exchange of tweets between Prime Minister and Jaishankar, Jaishankar wished him. Prime Minister responded. It's a fairly sober and balanced message. There's no reference to Taiwan. There's no reference to President of ROC. He talks about developing economic and technological relations between India and Taiwan, which is our position. We have been doing that for quite some time. We have an office in Taipei since 1995, which is headed by an Indian diplomat. So it's not that we have
That's very
started
interesting.
something now we have not been doing earlier. Chinese have a habit of protesting about a whole lot of issues. We don't take those protests too seriously.
That's very interesting, Ambassador, because we have never actually also backed self-determination for the Tibetans. We haven't supported Tibetan independence. We haven't even recognized the Tibetan government in exile. And even after, and Taiwan, of course, since you say we've had an office there since 1995, so we have sort of de facto, we have a presence there. If it's headed by an Indian diplomat, that is quite interesting. There is a new.
I think one has to differentiate between engagement
and
in
Taiwan.
Taiwan, which is a major economy, and they are important trading partner for us, source of investment, and we keep in touch with them.
And we've also established good business relationships with them, in the sense we are trying to outsource our semiconductors, all of the stuff that China would supply. We have been approaching Taiwan instead.
When it comes to advanced semiconductors, as you know, Taiwan, they are the leaders in the world. They account for nearly 85-90% of production of advanced semiconductors. We are encouraging them to set up operations in India. There's already a forward movement. One Taiwanese semiconductor company has got into joint venture with the Tata Group, and they are in the process of setting up a fab in India. Likewise, other Taiwanese entities like Foxconn, they have expanded their presence in India. That's something we welcome. Taiwan is an important part of global value chain in high-tech areas, electronics, semiconductors, and many other areas, and we would like to engage with them. This is not something India is doing surreptitiously. It's being done openly. And there is no hidden agenda behind it.
Yeah, but where China is concerned, they did issue staple visas to people traveling from Jammu and Kashmir, and India did protest very strongly. But China has now gone and renamed Arunachal Pradesh as Zangnan, asserting its claim, just like it asserts its claim over the rest of Tibet. It's now claiming this is South Tibet. It's renamed 30 places in Arunachal Pradesh in a couple of months ago. Do you not see even then that it is that something that India has to stand up for or against?
We have been taking a strong position on those issues. I mentioned earlier that since 2009, we have not publicly reiterated our One China policy in any of the joint documents with China. And the backdrop is that they have been insensitive to our concerns. You referred to staple visa. They started issuing staple visas to Indian citizens coming to Arunachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir, something to which we took strong exception. They started resurrecting the narrative of Changnan, as you mentioned, South Tibet, which again, we object strongly. They have, as you mentioned, really childish game of renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh, that's not going to make any difference. But these steps convey a very negative message to India, and something that is registered. And in India, people feel that if Chinese are so insensitive on a host of issues, including their activities and projects in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, do we really
Absolutely.
need to be extra sensitive to their so-called interests, concerns? So this is a two-way traffic. I was present in the meeting between then Minister of External Affairs, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, and
Mhm.
Foreign Minister Wangi, who came to India in June 2014 as President Xi Jinping's special emissary. And in that meeting, our minister conveyed very categorically to Foreign Minister Wangi that if you don't respect One India policy, it's very difficult for us to keep
She said
reiterating
that.
One China policy. So it's not a new position. We have been taking certain position. As I mentioned, there has to be mutual sensitivity to each other's interests, concerns, and aspirations. If that doesn't
Ambassador, but
happen,
I was
yes.
reading up on in the background of Atal Bihari Vajpayee's visit to China, and there was a sense then that India was trying to placate China, and even during Mr. Modi's first term as Prime Minister, one of the biggest splashes was when Xi Jinping was invited to visit India. And both those times, the impression that we as journalists had was that we were trying to sort of calm the, relations with China and build a new kind of relationship. Has that changed then?
Well, Nina, I happened to be present uh, in
Wow.
meetings on both those occasions. In
Uh-huh.
2003, when Prime Minister Vajpayee visited Beijing, it was a very important visit. Uh, we made a very serious effort to move towards resolution of outstanding issues, especially the boundary question. The new mechanism of special representatives was set up, and in 2005, in fact, we had the agreement on political parameters and guiding principles of boundary settlement.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
happened to
yeah.
be the lead negotiator from our side for that agreement. But somewhere down the road, Chinese position changed. They lost interest in seeking early boundary settlement. And you're aware of
I see.
what's happening in Eastern Ladakh since
Yes.
summer of 2020. Coming to Prime Minister Modi's engagement with President Xi in 2014, again, that was an important visit in a departure from protocol. Prime Minister Modi traveled to Ahmedabad to receive President Xi. During the visit, situation along the border in Demchok and Chumar escalated, and Prime Minister personally conveyed in no uncertain terms our unhappiness about that. And Chinese took on board our concerns. I was
I
involved
see.
in those negotiations, and we told Chinese very clearly that you have to restore status quo ante as of 1st September 2014, which they did.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's not that we were placating; we were making, an effort
The right moves.
to sort of improve relations with India. At that point of time, Chinese also seemed to be interested. When Prime Minister visited China in May 2015, I was ambassador in Beijing at that time. President Xi traveled to Xi'an, his hometown, to especially receive Prime Minister, and it was a very successful visit. But somewhere down the road, contradictions and structural problems in relations
What exactly do you
resurfaced.
mean by that, Ambassador? What do you mean by structural problems? I mean, what
No,
does that mean?
the trigger has been, as you're aware, what happened in Eastern Ladakh in
Yes.
summer of 2020, when China sought to change this status quo through
Hmm.
multiple intrusions
Yes.
uh, and by inducting troops in large number, which was quite
What would
inexplicable.
what brought that on? What brought that
You
on?
know, we can keep speculating on
Speculating.
what was the motive behind China's behavior. But the bottom line is that they were trying to change the status quo. And to some extent, they did manage to change the status quo, but our response was strong. So we prevented them from making any further changes. And that situation remains unresolved. At several places where Indian forces were patrolling, they're unable to go back to those patrolling points,
Yeah,
including in
yeah,
Depsang and
and
Demchok
then Chok.
areas. And there is a high level of deployment of troops from both sides. They started it, we had to respond, and both sides are fairly entrenched. Uh,
And they're building up
you
their
know, so
their
nature of border has changed from being
correct.
a relatively peaceful border. It has become a live border,
Hmm.
which is not a desirable situation. In fact, recently, Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, also mentioned publicly that this kind of high-level troop deployment is not something desirable. It can lead to problems, and we have taken the position that as long as border areas remain abnormal, it's difficult to restore normalcy in overall relations. So there's one set of problem. There are a whole lot of other issues. I will not go into those in detail, but world views of India and China are divergent today. We have concerns about their behavior in South Asia, in Indian Ocean region. They are not supportive of rise of India in many domains. You're aware of economic engagement, how it has become very
Absolutely.
one-sided. So there are a whole lot of problems which in a way predate what happened in Eastern Ladakh. But a
That's right.
combination of uh, you know tense borders and those structural challenges persisting has led to present predicament in India-China relations, and there's no doubt about the fact that relations are today at a very low ebb.
So I've yet to have a very interesting development with the, I mean, the question about Russia that the Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov has raised today or yesterday, where he said that Prime Minister Modi's Moscow visit this coming July 8th fits perfectly into Russia's strategic forum, which is of course strategic foreign policy, which I thought was interesting. And then he brought up the Russia, India, China RIC partnership, the RIC partnership. He said the Russia, India, China troika that was a former Russian Foreign Minister Yevgeny Primakov's brainchild is something that he wants to resurrect. He says that the Russia, India, China triangle should become the symbol of the multipolar world. It should become its core. Now, Rick has not met since COVID. It has not met since the Galwan clash of June 2020. I mean, RIC was supposed to be the confidence building measure between India and China, really, in a smaller format. I mean, not with the addition of Brazil, which then became BRICS. So, is this a move by Russia to sort of, play the peacemaker because between, a country that it needs very badly, as in China, for, arms and other resources, and, an old friend like India. So is he attempting to mend fences between an old ally and a newer friend?
Uh, well, there are several issues involved here. One coming to Rick that you referred to, I have been participant in RIG processes both at track 1 and track 2 levels. It is a rather imbalanced engagement where India-Russia relations remain strong. Russia-China relations have become definitely much stronger in
Stronger.
recent years, but India-China relations have become much weaker. So it's a triangle which is rather sort of distorted.
Yeah.
So I don't see RIC process gaining much momentum anytime soon. So that is there.
What prompted Sergei Lavrov to bring up something like
No, I
that
mean,
then?
Russia has been interested in RIC process. They would like that process to continue. I think for them also, it's a somewhat challenging, balancing game when they talk about looking east in their foreign policy.
Yeah.
Today, as you know, the relations with Western countries have deteriorated very sharply. They have become more dependent on China, no doubt about it. But India is also a major partner country for Russia. So they would like to, in the ideal world, see better relations between India and China. But I don't see Russia playing any
A mediator
role
role.
in peacemaking between India and China. We are two very large countries. We don't quite need mediators to sort out our issues. We are quite capable of talking to each other, but that requires creation of certain conditions. If you want a breakthrough,
I actually wanted to find out from you where it could go. Where will this India-China relationship lead? I mean, is there any way that diplomats have written in, calling for private papers, which I've read, where they say that we should reach out to China. But is that really feasible?
it's not a question of reaching out to China. China is our largest neighbor, no doubt about it. Uh, we share a land
What
border
is the
of
way forward?
nearly 3,500 kilometers with them. We would like to see that those borders remain relatively peaceful. So first requirement, an essential guarantor for normal development relations is peaceful borders with India and China. And this is a position both sides have accepted in the past. I'll refer you to a joint statement which came out in May 2015 during Prime Minister Modi's visit to China. And as I mentioned earlier, I was in Beijing at that time. In fact, it uses the term essential guarantor. And so it's actually a prerequisite. We are not saying that the boundary question must be resolved before we have normal relations with China. What we are saying
is that a fact?
no,
Is that a fact?
there's a difference. What we are saying is that borders should remain peaceful. We have agreed in a series of agreements, respect line of actual control, not to upset it unilaterally. We are telling China that we have done that. So you need to change your position. Only then we'll be able to get back to greater normalcy in India-China relations. But I've also suggested that that doesn't preclude talks with China. In fact, when you have difficult moments in relations with a large neighbor, there's need to engage. This engagement, I'm sure, is taking place through diplomatic channels, but it can take other forms, including, in the past we had quiet back channel diplomacy. I don't know what's happening, but we need to discuss what I described as structural challenges in relations in a substantive manner. It cannot be done in a routine manner at the level of corps commanders.
Yes, absolutely. They've had 21 rounds between the corps commanders, and it's gone nowhere. Now China's creating buffer zones on the border. So with India, and it's building up its reinforcements. It's got underground bunkers. It's got all kinds of things which they never had before. I mean, there are satellite imagery which actually show this kind of build-up on the border. But if I can just go back to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow, what is the reasoning behind making Moscow the first state visit? I mean, not G7 was the other big event that Modi attended. I mean, Modi's meetings, I mean, the official readout is about defense, energy, trade, connectivity, partnership, and so on and so forth. But Lavrov was also given the whole Modi visit a very great status. He sort of built it up into the phraseology used as a special privileged strategic partnership. So who needs us more? Is it Russia needing us more, or does India need Russia?
We don't quite look at our key partnerships in that light, that who needs whom more. We have a strategic relationship with Russia. They have stood by us in difficult moments, something we always remember. We have, maintained engagement on a whole lot of issues. Recently, as you're aware, our trade has increased mainly because of,
and our joint defense missile.
Joint defense cooperation is continuing.
Well, I think I can criticize China, defend my country in the strongest term, again and again and again and again. Does it solve the problem? It doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem. I can go to the Everest and say I am the right. All those things are fine, but you have to argue. You have to make a point logically. Unless you are a spokesperson for the MEA, it doesn't make a sense for me to come to your television and defend the whatever the government position is. The point is that we have a position.
What would you advise the government if you were?
No, we have a position of non-negotiable position. Borders cannot be negotiated. It's a grandstanding. Okay. I'm not saying the Chinese are saying that these borders are not negotiable. But the Chinese are posturing all the time that look, like Panchil and many, many other things. They keep on telling you, let's solve it and these things. But then foreign policy, especially with China and the border, is a reflection of our own domestic politics. Which group of political parties are likely to knows what Modi wants to do? Last time he was in Wuhan, to do something, and some forces prevailed. No, don't talk to Chinese, come back. And by the time he was in Mahabalipuram, it was stalled. So the point is that now I saw Ambassador, previous speaker was saying that they have done this thing. What really happened in Eastern Ladakh in the recent time is that we went on a massive infrastructure building, road building spree.
That's right.
Okay, that provoked the Chinese, certainly. The Congress party was not that hasty. Congress party was doing its own style, in own way, a lot of corruption, slow pace and things like that. But now this government has day and night they were constructing in the Eastern Ladakh. So the Chinese says, oh, hold on, what is it? There are some disputes here. You are trying to bring some material changes on the ground. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, so they put it. Now, point is that you linked it with Tibet. Now you played this Tibet card. Is it India's core interest? Is it a core issue? Is it like Kashmir? No. Once you play the Tibet card, they will come to Leh now. The point is you cannot stop the Chinese. Huh?
Your hometown.
Yeah, it's a never-ending thing, and you are not able to push them back. So okay, the more
are you saying, Ambassador Stopdan, that if India does push back on Tibet, I mean, instead not just allowing, as it has allowed many visits to the Dharamshala, if it does anything more in the sense that it arms the Tibetans or allows Tibetan incursions, then India will pay a price. Right now, all it has done is allowed a visit. So it's not really a Tibet card, so to speak, is it?
Yeah, but it irritates them. They
Hmm.
retaliate. They respond in some different way in Arunachal Pradesh. Respond somewhere in Maldives. Respond you somewhere in Nepal. So in international diplomacy, it doesn't mean that you do this and you do that. It's a very
I
complex
see.
thing. So the point is that if it is not your core interest, then why do you play around with Tibet? And which is in the 60 years, it hasn't produced you anything. The point is that even the Chinese claim on Indian territory is based on the Tibetan claim. So it's a
I see.
contradiction. It's a contradiction. Chinese have no claim on Ladakh, or Chinese have no claim in Sikkim or in Arunachal. It's the Tibetans who have claim. Chinese are simply, you know, trying to tell
Climb down to that bandwagon. Climb down to
these
the
are
Tibetan bandwagon.
these are the position which was taken by Tibetan government before 1959. So today they say, look, well, like
So could
Maharaja
you
has claimed
explain that?
something.
Could you please explain that to our viewers, Ambassador Stobden? I don't get that. You mean to say that Tibet, the pre-1959 Tibet, had laid claim to Ladakh and Arunachal and
Yes, there are
Sikkim?
written, there are not only claim, but there are written claims sent by
Mm-hmm.
the Lhasa government. Then there was some autonomous kind of a government they had. The Dalai Lama was just 18 years old,
Mm-hmm.
but the telegram came on the 16th of October 1947, just 2 months after our independence, asking India to return all the territories from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. Now
I
that
see.
we don't want to talk, and we blame the Chinese. It was a Tibetan government who claimed it. Like it is like Ranjit Singh claiming Aksai Chin, or Dogra Raja of Hari Singh or Gulab Singh claiming. Once he has claimed that Aksai Chin was part of Jammu and Kashmir, we continue, we claim. So it's in the same manner. It is the Chinese have the right to reiterate what the government of Tibet said before 1959. So and the Tibetans have never retracted this demand. Now the so-called even the McMahon line, the Tibetans have never endorsed it. They signed the treaty, but they never ratified it.
I
So
see.
the Chinese were never there. Chinese walked out in 1914 from the Shimla Agreement. So the point is that things are not clear whether these are being articulated or not. The Tibetan claim comes up to Chandigarh. So what do you want to do? Do we concede the whole of Himalaya to Tibet? The point, and we play. These are all emotional game that we do, but in concrete terms, scientifically, this is not possible. To just be wishy-washy and everything is fine and meditate and things like that. That's not possible. There are
So you're
specific.
basically saying that the Tibetans' claim over Indian territory predates China's claims, and it's
Oh
now
yes,
within.
it is the
And you're also
Tibetans who talked about five fingers,
oh, I see. Oh, that's
not the
very interesting.
Chinese. Chinese came much later on when they took full control of Tibet. There are maps, there are telegrams, there are documents, and today nobody feels comfortable about talking about all these things. So you are basically a victim of a larger thing. India-China problem is there, but I don't think China or India was responsible. There are forces which will never allow India and China to be close. The
I
American, of
see.
course, Tibet card is the American card. They will never
Hmm.
like to see India and China together. But we are subservient to the Americans. We love what Americans says, so we go along with what Americans do.
Yeah. Right now, yes,
Yeah,
that's
but we
true.
don't see the reasoning. We don't see
Yeah.
the reasoning, and perhaps we don't intend to even solve the problem.
That's very interesting, and it also serves India's interest because we can get we can get fresh armaments and more funding.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. To be ambiguous is always better for survival.
so you're saying there is a reason that that Prime Minister Modi has given the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting at Astana a miss, and is choosing instead to go to Russia to make his first state visit.
No, I do not think Premako, Sergei Lavrov has said what he has said yesterday without consulting India. If he,
Ah,
if he has talked about RIC,
yes.
he wouldn't have just said it like that. When Prime Minister Modi is going to Moscow, homework must have been done. Why
Hmm.
not? He just formed a government in Delhi, Prime Minister Modi. Why not give a shot for India-China relationship? Okay, Russian goodwill will always be there. Tell me, if Russia doesn't do it, who will do it? The Americans will always add fuel to the fire. Which country is expected to do? I'm not saying mediation, but create condition or create an environment for some kind of a trilateral strategic rebalancing. Well, it's not for the first time the Russians have said this. Russia have been saying about RIC for a very long time. But then we have a position, a grandstanding position. China is this, China is that, and the Chinese say the same thing, India is that. So it makes good sense for Russia to discuss this point of triangular, you know, coexistence or whatever that you want to talk.
That's a very interesting point. You could differ completely then with Ashok Kant on the subject of
Yeah,
Russia,
yeah. I
India,
mean,
and
look,
China.
head of the state is going to Moscow. I'm sure all these things are discussed in advance. I'm not saying tomorrow India and China is going to become friendly because of Russia, but Prime Minister is weaker than what he used to be before. Xi Jinping is still going strong. What options do you have?
Anyway, so to get back to Russia and India, so you're basically saying that it's not a question of who needs more in this world. It doesn't work like that. It's basically about a shared shared interests geopolitically. But then Russia has also become a pariah, in the international community because of the Ukraine issue. So where does that leave India?
Nina, I would like to sort of
Maybe
uh,
that word is too
challenge that
strong a
little
word.
bit. Uh, 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 you know, uh, yes, with the Western world, Russia has problem, but Russia has fairly strong engagement with many of the countries, including India, China, several countries of global South. So using these terms like pariah state, I don't think quite applies to a country like Russia. We when it comes to friends, and Russia has been a friend, we don't change our position lightly. We have believed in strategic autonomy, which involves, developing relations with different countries simultaneously. Uh, we have a strategic partnership with Russia, as we have extremely important relationships with the USA, with European countries, Japan,
So how do
Australia,
we
but
navigate
but
that?
you don't quite. They're not contradictory as we say things.
But how do we navigate that? Because I mean, we have the whole issue of, our newest ally, the United States. I mean, Jake Sullivan was there, and so was Kurt, whatever his name is. I mean, they were two very powerful, officials from the Biden administration in India recently. One of whom was a China expert, and I mean, there is concern. I think that India's closeness to Russia, is. I mean, why are they turning a blind eye?
I'll suggest that there is understanding of
The
India's
reality.
relations with Russia. There is appreciation that this relationship has a history, and why this relationship remains important to India and to Russia, that's something which is appreciated. And I believe there's also some resonance to our argument that we need to give Russia options. If you don't do that, Russia becomes too dependent on one country, which will not be in interest of either India or even Western countries. So we need to take a longer term view of these relationships and continue to develop them. If you look at India's oil purchase from Russia,
Yeah.
There was understanding in Europe. In fact, there was export of
Of refined oil to
refined oil
Europe,
sourced
to
from
Germany.
Russia to Europe, which also helped in ensuring that global
The economy stayed
markets
afloat.
remained relatively stable. So it
Yeah.
worked to everyone's advantage.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But my last question to you, Ambassador, is all about now what we can achieve. I mean, in the sense that somehow I have a feeling from what I hear. I mean, I may be completely wrong, that Russia is very clear that it will counsel China against taking any kind of move against making any kind of aggressive move against India. Do you see that happening at all, or is it just conjecture?
No, I don't see Russia playing any significant role when it comes to mending of ties between India and China. That's a burden we'll have to carry. Russia would like to see improved relations between India and China for a variety of reasons, as I mentioned earlier. But their ability to counsel China to be more mindful of India's concerns, interests, aspirations, I'm afraid is somewhat limited. I don't think they can really persuade China to change its position. If China changes position, that will be, keeping in mind whole lot of other factors, including the bigger geopolitical picture, and also need to have better relations with India.
But there are very strong reports coming out from within China also about the deployment of Chinese troops on the border, saying that they don't have enough troops because most of these troops are children of privilege, and they're not able to take the tough what it requires to stay on the border for great long periods of time, unlike our soldiers.
Well, I think the war or conflict on the ground now is not going to be fought one soldier against the other. There are technology, there are weapon system, and I know for the fact that the Chinese are doing huge thing in the Western Theater Command.
What are they doing?
The military preparation, infrastructure, weaponry, air, ground, or whatever that they have. So point is that we've read in the newspaper they are the soldiers of PLA have been grown up with Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola and things like that, and we have counterparts Jats and Sikhs who can fight them. Although those things are nice to to hear these things, but ground reality is they have robots, they have many ways of fighting war. System has changed now. I will never underestimate my enemy. And the point is that for us, it's a very costly affair. We are spending thousands of crores every day in Eastern Ladakh for military, expenditure, keeping the troops stationed there. I don't know. The Chinese never come out with economic analysis. Maybe they are benefiting. The PLA deployment in Eastern Ladakh is part of the global chain, supply chain. They produce, they manufacture, they sustain the troops, but they also make money from exports to 153 countries. So, whereas you and me pay for the soldiers from our pockets, from the defense budget. So things are quite different. How long can we go on having conflict at the border? Huge deployment of more than 1 lakh or more than 1 lakh troops along the LAC in Eastern Ladakh. So these are questions that nobody asks. One has to be very, very, you have to analyze all this factor because it's not a normal situation.
Ambassador, my last question to you is about our the fact that the US also has turned a blind eye in many ways to India's relationship with Russia. I mean, I brought it up with the Ambassador Kant also. What purpose does that serve? Because I mean, India also is playing a really balancing act, to my mind, and since it has to keep its relationship with Russia alive because we need the oil and we need the ammunition and the trade. But we also need the US because for various strategic reasons, to keep China on at bay. So how are we going to negotiate that?
That's why I think Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow this time is not going to be much about bilaterals. It's a strategic balance of power issues because we must remember that 2024-25 is going to be very turbulent. There's going to be election in the US, in UK, in France, and things are going to change. And now that Pakistan is going to be playing some role in the United Nations because of things, I think on the international politics, things are going to be very challenging for India. So relying on Russia is very important. Americans can be very fickle-minded. They can squeeze you on human rights, especially during the election. The Democrats and independent Republicans and they're going to raise these issues of Khalistan and many other issues of India. So it's quite natural. In fact, the visit of US congressmen to India to meet the Dalai Lama is also part of the election campaign in the United States. Effectively on the ground, it makes no difference. But I'm surprised how Prime Minister has received Nancy Pelosi and others who here. Probably it's a security context. It may not be a real foreign policy issue. But fact is that it's going to be a very difficult year. And Moscow's confidence is very essential for India. We stood by Russia in its difficult hours vis-a-vis Ukraine and other conflict. When we were in difficult hours, the Russians were standing up with us. So I think it's a reiteration. SEO is not important. SEO we have downgraded. Even last year when the summit, we were the chair of SEO last year. We had a virtual summit, not even an in-person summit in October 2023. So partly because the Americans were not very happy with SEO and we are ganging up against the United because SEO is a purely anti-American setup.
That's right.
I mean, in posturing and everything, it's an anti-American thing. So I think it's a we should have joined SEO in the first place in 2005. But then now I see that not sticking to SEO charter will bring bad name for us because we are responsible for the death of SARC, death of SCO, or death of anything. It's a good thing. We should remain engaged, but I think Prime Minister has sent a message to President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan that we fully support the Kazakh initiative, and we don't know at what level these things have been managed. But I think SEO is a different thing. Moscow is very important. Trade relationship is growing irrespective of the political thing. We're touching $60 billion now. From nowhere, from $9 billion or $10 billion to 60. So, but all because of the oil import. Russia is important. We should take the opportunity of the openings today we have with Russia, and it serves. I think this is the brilliant aspect of Indian foreign policy in the last couple of years is the relationship with Russia. I think
Thank you very
we are a reliable friend and a partner.
Yeah, yeah, that's all. That's all we have time for. All eyes will be on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia and whether we play along with Putin's Russian roulette and outsmart an increasingly aggressive Beijing that is trying to set itself up as the leader of the global South, a role that India does aspire to. Thank you very much, Ambassador Kanta, and thank you very much, Ambassador Stobdan, for coming on the show. Thank you, viewers. Please click on the new Indian Express and Global Express icon and share it with like-minded people. Thanks very much.